So while we get the IT sorted, my first interaction with Interplast was when I was president of the Rotary Club of Gawler, and we had a wonderful Rotarian called Elizabeth Briggs who was involved with Interplast, and with her help, the Rotary Club of Gawler had a global grant project where we sent a team of surgeons led by Dr. Tim Proudman to Bhutan to do training and also do hand surgery in Bhutan. And we'll come to Bhutan because it's a very great Interplast story a little bit later in the presentation. I'm hoping it's just down arrow, side arrow. Enter. Okay. So many of you in the room may know about Interplast, but for some new Rotarians or guests, they may not. So let me give you some of the background. So Interplast Australia and New Zealand was co-founded in 1983 by Rotary, by a Rotarian, some Rotarians in Melbourne, and the Royal Australian College of Surgeons in Victoria. Rotary has been a vital part of Interplast's work since then. And it is a fantastic story involving Rotary every step of the way. It started off small, being run out of a Rotarian's lounge room, and is now making a significant difference to thousands of lives in 16 countries across the Pacific and Southeast Asia. Do I keep going? So in 1983, Dr. Leo Rosner, a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, returned to Australia after having seen firsthand how the American version of Interplast was changing lives in South America. He was invited to visit a Rotary Club as guest speaker to talk about his experience. And in the audience was Rotarian Dr. Gerald Duff. Dr. Duff was so inspired that he wanted to set up a similar program in Australia to work in the Pacific region. There was a desperate need then, as there is now, for plastic and reconstructive surgical interventions and allied treatment in developing nations. A partnership was set up with Professor Donald Marshall and the Royal Australian College of Surgeons, and Interplast was born. This could be even worse. Up arrow, Milos?
Yep. The other right.
The other right, the down. So just a little bit about Interplast. So Interplast is a not-for-profit company limited by guarantee. By constitution, 4 of the 9 company members are Rotarians, and 9, there's a Rotarian subcommittee, of which 9 past district governors from around Australia and New Zealand form that subcommittee. I probably should have explained, Marie Dorrington was on the board of Interplast. She is now a company member. She was on the board for 9 years. When she retired, she nominated me to be on the board. So I'm on the board of Interplast now. Marie is a company member, and I chair the Rotarian committee for Interplast. And 2 of the board directors must be Rotarians, so it's myself and Paul Ferguson, who's a Rotarian from District 9800, I think, 9815, I think. And Rotary clubs and Rotarians from across Australia and New Zealand currently contribute 25% of Interplast's fundraising income. Oh, look at that. So what does Interplast do? Interplast changes lives, not only the lives of the patients and the future patients, but those of their families and community as well. And many of you in this room are familiar with ROMAC, so Rotary Overseas Medical Aid for Children, and Interplast and ROMAC have a memorandum of understanding. ROMAC bring children to Australia for surgery in Australian hospitals. So if Interplast teams are in some of the developing countries in the Pacific and they find cases that can't be treated from a surgical visit, they will come back and refer to ROMAC, who sometimes take those cases on. Darcy mentioned before that sometimes it's the Interplast surgeons who do the surgery back here. So all of the surgeons are volunteers. So it's not just limited to surgery, and I guess what Interplast does has changed since 1983, particularly during COVID, when surgical missions in person weren't possible. So not just free plastic and reconstructive surgery, but also the pre and post-op care of allied health, including physiotherapists, speech therapists and hand therapists. They don't just fly in and out of partner countries to perform surgery. Interplast has very strong commitments to training so that capacity is built in the systems of the countries where they are. So by enhancing the capacity of local health systems and working with local partners, it develops national strategies, it helps with gender equality and support of allied health development as well as evaluation of programs overseas. This is all done so that the next generation of patients don't have to wait for Interplast to visit, but can be helped by their local clinicians. And in an ideal world, with many of the things that Rotary does, if we could do ourselves out of a job, wouldn't that be great? Interplast also provides mobility assistance in the form of prosthetics limbs, wheelchairs and crutches for patients in the Pacific, many of whom have lost feet or lower limbs to diabetic foot disease. Many of you may be aware, but the introduction of sugar into the diets of people in not just Pacific Islands but Africa as well has resulted in an epidemic of diabetes. And often when Interplast would go there for surgical missions, there was a lot of time spent on amputating limbs due to diabetes. So one of Interplast's key programs now is diabetic foot care, which is actually to teach people in country how to look after the feet so the surgeons don't have to amputate. So that's a really positive intervention. So why do we still need Interplast? Unfortunately, only 6% of all surgeries that take place in the world's every year are in the poorest countries. Or to phrase it in other ways, 94% of all surgeries take place in developed nations like Australia, New Zealand, the USA and the UK. This does not reflect the need. From its inception in 1983, Interplast has provided more than 27,000 surgeries and over 14,000 training opportunities. And Interplast is very proud of this, and that has only been possible with the help of Rotary. The training that Interplast delivers takes different forms, and volunteers often forge close relationships with their in-country partners and continue to support them remotely. It's fantastic what technology we have now to do that. More than 16,000 hours of mentoring has been delivered, and webinars apparently viewed more than 91,000 times. The webinars cover a wide range of topics. They're recorded and freely accessed by anyone, anywhere in the world. Apparently word of mouth has spread to countries outside of the Pacific, with the webinars used in Afghanistan, Pakistan and Nauru. And some of their clinicians have used the training resources of Interplast. Interplast has recorded 111 training videos which are available free and on demand. So Interplast is a good fit for Rotary support. So together we make a difference across 2 of the 5 avenues of Rotary service, international vocational service, and also Rotary's areas of focus, particularly community development, maternal and child health and disease development and treatment. So this is what training looks like. Every surgery is a training opportunity, and you can see in this photo how many of the local clinicians are so keen to observe the surgery and to learn from both the surgeons and anaesthetists. The training can also look like this, with training modules delivered from Australia or New Zealand to nurses in the Pacific. The training videos are filmed in Melbourne. So on the right, Dr. Kirsty McGill, who's actually the president of the Interplast board, is demonstrating how to make a skin graft using a grapefruit. It also looks like this. Penny McMahon, one of the volunteers, is demonstrating how to fit a hand splint, as well as providing the patient exercises, how to restore function to the hand and Interplast back home. I've just realised I've got my wrong notes. Sorry about this. This could get a bit weird. I've got last time's notes. So this is an example of the mobility aids which are provided. So I think it was about 3 years ago, Murray, there was a not-for-profit called Motivation Australia, which had all of the wheelchair prosthetics that became part of Interplast to build this new part. It's quite a synergistic partnership which supports the work of surgeons. This is the countries where Interplast works. You can see it's not only limited to the Asia Pacific, but is mostly there. The furthest away is Mongolia, right up the top, and we've mentioned Bhutan. So one of the best ways to see what Interplast does is to introduce some of the people impacted by the work. I probably should get Murray to talk these next 2 slides. So the project that I was involved with, the Rotary Club of Gawler, which was in 2017-ish, Dr. Tim Proudman was a plastic and reconstructive surgeon from Adelaide who sadly lost a battle with cancer 2 years ago. He was only 65. Tim had a passion for work in Bhutan. Not only did he lead teams there, but he fundraised to support those missions as well. And when he started going there, Dr. Sonam was a young surgeon, general surgeon. And over the years, his work with Dr. Proudman he has now trained to be a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. I might get Murray to tell the story because she's better at it than I am.
Oh, not at all. That's okay. That would be me. Call me clumsy. My family all do. Thank you. I got to know Sonam Jamsho really, really well because Interplast sponsored him to come to Adelaide to do his final training to become a plastic and reconstructive surgeon. Sonam came to Adelaide and I met him first at the Clare Rotary Club. They had an art show and he and his wife were there. And so it was a time to meet him and get to know him from an Interplast perspective. I got to know them both really, really well in that period of time. And in fact, they both became, Sonam and Pema, both became members of the Rotary Club of Prospect, which is my club, and in fact still belong to the Rotary Club of Prospect. When we suggested that the Rotary Club of Thimphu might welcome them, they were really keen because they thought we would be able to tell them more and get them more familiar with Rotary than the Rotary Club of Thimphu. We were honoured. I'm not entirely sure that the honour was completely ours, but it means that we have gone on to sponsor them, not so much in the area of medicine, but in the area of education. And Sonam believed very, very strongly that he came from a village very close to the border with China, and he felt that the only reason he had ever been able to become a plastic and reconstructive surgeon was because his mother sent him to Thimphu for education when he was 10, sent him to live with his uncle. And he was really, really committed, and he is one of the most impressive young men that I have ever met, and with a heart as big as you can imagine, both in medicine but also in the area of education. And so he works with the school, the primary school to which he went, in a nomadic area where it's really hard to persuade some of the parents to actually send their children to school. And so, and I'm off Interplast in a sense. So our club has a project that the first stage of which, as Sonam calls it, phase 1, and phase 2 and 3 are still to come. But Sonam himself is now the only plastic and reconstructive surgeon in Bhutan, and you can imagine how much work and what a difference that he's made. So it's an example, I think, of what Interplast does outside of surgery in particular. The government of Bhutan at that time signed a memorandum of understanding with Interplast that they would support Sonam when he returned to Bhutan after he had finished his study. And what an impact he has made in that time. The photograph that you're looking at there is the photograph of a worker in Bhutan whose arm was amputated in a work site situation. Apparently he put it in a plastic bag, so if your arm is ever amputated, apparently putting it in a plastic bag, particularly if you happen to be overseas at the time, is quite significant. And only because Sonam had been trained to become a plastic and reconstructive surgeon was it possible for that worker's arm to be reattached. And I understand from the Bhutanese publicity that was given to it at the time that within a week that worker was able to move his fingers. And I think, while it is but one example, I think that is truly a brilliant example of the work that can be done in an indirect sort of a way. And so I personally feel very strongly about what Interplast, I almost said what Interplast has been able to achieve in that one example. And I think that's all it is one example, but I think it's a brilliant example at that.
A short person. I think you agree that is an amazing story of capacity building. So Interplast continues to support Dr. Sonam, and teams still go to Bhutan, but it's incredible that the country now has its own reconstructive surgery capacity. So this is Gladdy. Gladdy was 7 when this photo was taken. She and her family live in Laos, in a remote part of the country. You can see the tumour on her arm and under her body. So fortunately for Gladdy, the tumour was benign and the Interplast team was able to remove it. This is the sort of thing that we never see in Australia, and I know the work with ROMAC, we see similar types of patients where in Australia a child would had surgery when they're very young or when something first happened. And I think at times we complain about our medical system, but we really we shouldn't, because people in other countries are just way worse. So on the right-hand side is the photo of Gladdy with her family after surgery, with the surgeon and nurse from Interplast. So you can see how much better she was afterwards. So Daphne, again, Daphne was very fortunate in that she was 4 months old when she had her cleft lip repaired. Often that happens much later for children in these countries. So the cleft occurs when the roof of the mouth doesn't fuse together in utero, and it causes difficulty with feeding. So afterwards, 7 years later, you can barely see the scar. And cleft palate is, I understand, not being a surgeon, generally quite a straightforward surgery. Apparently in 2024, when this photo was taken, Daphne's mum heard that the Interplast team was at the hospital and brought Daphne in so everyone could see how she was. So Roxanne is 5 in the photo on the left, and again, severe cleft lip and palate, much worse than what Daphne had. Roxanne lived in the remote northwest of the Solomon Islands and had to travel for nearly 3 days by boat with his mum to reach the hospital in Honiari. The surgeon from Interplast said it was one of the worst cases of bilateral cleft he'd seen. And again, you know, we just wouldn't see this in Australia. It would have been fixed shortly after birth. And the issues are not just physical. Children with these sort of deformities experience bullying at school because the kids don't understand why they look different. Their families are ostracised, and they often drop out of school because of the bullying and the stigma. So that means they miss out on education and then have reduced outcomes right through their life. So Roxanne had 2 Interplast surgeries, the first to repair his lip and build his nose. And the following year, his cleft palate was repaired. To do that, the surgeon took a bone graft from one of his ribs to build the roof of his mouth. And I think there's another slide. No. And I think the right-hand side is after the second surgery. So his speech improved. He could eat and drink much better over time. And even better, the children were no longer afraid of him, and he can go to school and all the things that children should be able to do. This is Pasillo. He's one of a current Interplast patient, and burns are very common because of wood fires, etc. And he was 4 when he was burnt. His T-shirt caught fire, and he's sustained severe burns to his chest, neck, and upper arms. So again, my son was burnt when he was 13 months old, but he was operated a week later and had skin grafts at the Women's and Children. Didn't have to go through anything like this. So for children like Pasillo, when they're burnt, there's often not even first aid knowledge about how to help them. And then as the healing happens, the strictures make it difficult for them to function. So the photo on the right is after the first surgery, and you can see it's slightly better, and his mum were overjoyed with the result, and thinks her son might be a surgeon one day. And this is Pasillo after the second surgery, which, due to the extent of the contractures around his neck, he had a second surgery in 2024, and more of the contractures were removed to allow him more movement, particularly on his left arm. Oop. Sorry. Sorry about that. So at the moment, all of the surgeries you've seen can be carried out for $1,500 because the surgeons, anaesthetists, nurses and allied health professionals volunteer their time. They can be provided free to patients in desperate need. In Australia, the surgeries like this would cost tens of thousands of dollars each. So thank you very much for having us here today and allowing us to take some of your time to talk about the work of Interplast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ML, for that truly inspirational example of just some of the work that Interplast does. So I'm wondering if we've got time for some questions, haven't we, Gildy? Yes. Milos has the microphone, so any questions from anyone? Florian.
Okay, so as an economist, I have to ask the rationing question. So there's obviously much more cases out there than Interplast can actually treat. Like, how does the surgeon or how does Interplast actually decide who gets treated? It's like, is the focus on the worst cases or the hardest cases, or is there kind of like, we're trying to basically get as many as possible and basically focus more on simple cases. So how do you decide who gets essentially treated and who gets not treated, given the constraints?
So I'll give a short answer and then Murray will give the right answer. When teams go in country, they have the first few days, people come in and they triage. My understanding is often one of the determinants is what sort of post-operative care is needed. So if you could do the surgery, but they need long-term care which can't be provided in country, then unfortunately the tough decision is made not to do it. So that's my understanding, but I'm going to let Mari, because she'll give you a better answer.
No, I will not. No, in fact, that's absolutely correct. I was privileged to go to Tonga with a team in 2017. In fact, I was in the theatre when Daphne's operation took place. Fabulous experience, like apart from my family, probably the most significant experience in my life to be there, although they told me I had to stand against the wall just in case I slid down during the operations. The truth is I was absolutely engaged with what was happening, and I described it when I left the board as watching miracles take place, because that's how I saw it. But yes, that's correct. Part of my experience was to actually, and I guess one couldn't do it in Australia, but I was actually in the room, the consulting room, as the surgeons consulted with everybody. The local circle, that there are surgeons but not specialists, the local surgeons in Tonga made the decision about who would be there, but it was the surgeons from Australia and New Zealand who went through and explained, and I was there when they had to say no to some people, that they wouldn't be able to do it, and however sad that was, of course, we have really, really strict conditions under which, and moral standards under which we work. So that's the situation, and I guess it's one of those situations where ROMAC is able to help people where Interplast finds it more difficult, because very often it's the post-operative care that is still in need of continued support.
I would say last year, I think it was, Charlie was out here from the Solomons, and Charlie was here for 3-4 months, I think. So, that is, and he had several operations and required quite a lot of care. But we actually took Charlie to the 2020 cricket one night. He was just a beautiful little boy, and his mum Rachel was lovely as well. So that's the great thing about having two organisations that can operate with slightly different models.
Quite often, the intensive care units don't exist in those countries. So, it's the follow-up, but it's also if something goes wrong, they can't do it. And we even have that trouble with ROMAC here in Australia, because not all of the states, like Canberra doesn't have a paediatric intensive care unit. And we've been caught there with kids being treated there and then we have to fly them up to Sydney. So there's a whole lot of aspects that impinge on that.
Just a comment. It's interesting that past district government Murray is here today as well. This club has a relationship with Interplast that goes back at least 10 years, Murray. And I think we gave 40,000 to support the work of Interplast that was raised by an activity that Rob Mottram did in the International Friendship of Golf. Mm-hmm. And we had a surplus of 40,000. And the consensus was that Interplast could benefit from that. And just as another observation, when she's here, Mary did the first baseline survey for the strategic planning in this club.
Jeff, did you have a question? No.
Nearly knocked something down to you in an auction.